Just start again and welcome all of you. Welcome you all in the room with me and our colleagues online as well. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the next in our ALC Research Seminar series, where we'll be discussing two new books. The first is titled Rage and Carnage in the Name of God, and the second one is titled Religion, Public Health and Human Security in Nigeria. And we're very privileged to have with us Professor Abiodun Alao, the author of both books, who will be taking us through the journey of putting these volumes together and reflecting on them together with us. We will also have two discussants. We're very privileged to have them here with us as well. We have with us Dr. Akin Iwelade, who is from the University of Edinburgh. And we also have with us Dr. Adebola Ojo, who is joining us here from the University of Leeds. So permit me to introduce them after we have the talk, and then we invite them to offer comments to us. Just before I welcome Professor Abiodun Alao, I just want to say a little bit about the volumes that we are here to discuss today. I'm very privileged to have two copies here with me. So you can see they are really here to our colleagues online as well. The first thing I want to say is the depth and the richness that we observe from these two volumes in terms of their interdisciplinarity. So what happens when we look at empirical realities on our African continent, and in this specific case in Nigeria, quite specifically, and take that as the starting point to making sense of concepts and theories and ideas. This is the sort of complex engagement with knowledge that comes to the fore. And it's really fantastic to see this. We see a breadth of disciplinary lenses that are used here. We see reflections on history, on religion, on politics as well. We also see reflection on public health. And quite often those of us who exist in university environments are siloed within particular departments. And that's really the way our universities are structured here in the UK where we're located, but in many parts of the African continent where many of us have also engaged with. And I think these volumes remind us of the significance of breaking down some of those disciplinary silos to begin to explore richer questions and potentially richer answers that help us to move forward on debates around socioeconomic and political transition in Nigeria in this case, but also in African contexts. Having said that, the final thing I want to say on this before I actually say a little bit about Professor Alao is that if there's anyone who could be talking about two books at one book talk, it would be Professor Alao. I'm not sure I know many other people who would actually be doing that. This really a testament to Prof and how you always find him in the middle of writing a book, one book or another. So Prof, we also look forward to hearing on what upcoming projects might be. Now, having said that, let me introduce Prof properly. Now, there's a very brief bio because we really don't have enough time on the clock to go through all the things that Prof has actually achieved. But let me say that Professor Alao's research focuses on emerging powers and global leadership, the politics of natural resource management, religious radicalization and political violence, as well as politics, security, and international relations. And apart from very extensive publications on African security issues, he has also undertaken numerous assignments for international organizations such as the United Nations, the African Union, the European Union, the World Bank, and ECOWAS. He was also part of a team that undertook a comprehensive threat assessment for Rwanda following the genocide. So very pivotal work that his research has also drawn him to. He's also been part of a group of academic experts that advised the Office of the United Nations Secretary General on the civil war in Sierra Leone. And a final point to note is that, of course, he co-authored the concept note for the Common Defense and Security Policy for the African Union, and also the first post-Civil War National Security Strategy Framework for Liberia. So from that, you see that this is someone with a wealth of experience as well as a wealth of knowledge. And it's absolutely intriguing to get the chance to hear him tell us how he's woven these stories together, given that very great depth of knowledge on issues that affect many of our lives today. So with that, Professor Lau, if you can join me in welcoming him here to tell us a little more about these volumes. Thank you so much. Please come and join me.
Thank you very much for that, Eka. She so much inflated me in her introduction that I did not even know who she was talking about. Thank you very much. And let me say, it's a great pleasure to see you all here, colleagues and friends, especially those that I've not seen for quite a long time, those who have been time-tested friends, like Dr. Randolph Kent and Dr. Ismail Rashid. And thank you very much. Let me start by confessing that this launch was affectionately imposed on me by my boss, the ALC director, Dr. Eka. We insisted that a form of, thank you very much. I hope that is red wine. We insisted that a form of event should be woven around these publications. Indeed, because of my lack of cooperation, this event had to be postponed twice. It was when I actually ran out of every excuse that I succumbed for today. So I want to thank you, Eka. Thanks, colleague Doriana. Fantastic. Clement, watching us from Australia, and colleagues here, thank you very much. And also our colleagues at the ALC in Nairobi. Michael, thank you very much for coming. Bunny, thanks a lot. Let me first of all say that publishing 2 books on Nigeria simultaneously was not by design. Indeed, it was almost when I was completing the second one that I realized that it's actually going to be 2 books on Nigeria in quick succession. My interest in writing a book on Nigeria came as a result of what I may call a friendly abuse from my late friend and colleague, Dr. Thomas J., who accused me for writing 2 books on his country, Liberia, without writing anything on my country of birth, Nigeria. It was after that friendly vilification from Thomas, TJ as we used to call him, that I started thinking seriously about writing something on Nigeria, but I never really imagined that it would be 2 in quick succession. What these 2 books have in common is focusing on religion and security. Indeed, religious link with Nigeria provides me what I can call a sort of serious contradiction, as it reinforces the catalog of ifs that have completely engulfed Nigeria. Nigeria is a country where you have imponderable ifs. What of if it were not the British people that colonized Nigeria? If the Civil War had not happened, if the military had not intervened, if June 12 had not happened, if this, so there are imponderable ifs that have colonized, that have really encompassed Nigeria. And religion is one thing that has added to this catalog of ifs. Nigeria is indeed a very deeply religious country. The country has the 6th largest population of Christians and the 5th largest population of Muslims in the world. And it is a country that has the largest population of both Christian and Muslim stayed together in one country. A BBC survey carried out in January 2004 actually designated Nigeria as the world's most religious country, with 90% of those people sampled say that they believe in God, they pray regularly, and they are ready to die for their religion. This level of commitment is actually something that has severe drawbacks for Nigeria, and we are going to touch on some of these. But there are also some people who believe very strongly that Nigeria is a very interesting country. And Nigerians are very religious, but totally godless. And this is something that we're going to slightly interrogate. The people are very religious, but totally godless. But that shows one of the numerous contradictions about Nigeria. Some people describe Nigeria as a country where the best is impossible, but the worst will not happen. Nigerians are considered to be positively committed to negative things or negatively committed to positive things. And these are not just toying with words. This is really part of the serious things that we are being confronted with as a nation. Let me just very briefly, I'm not going to take time on this, giving time for us to discuss more. Let me just briefly talk about each of the books. In the first book, Rage and Carnage in the Name of God, I tried to address the crucial question of religious violence. And there's a personal dimension to this thing. As a young child, no, not as a young person, I witnessed the 1980 Matatini riot in Kano. That was the first religious riot in Nigeria that brought the country to the focus of international attention. And I also lost a first cousin in one of the numerous religious countries that took place in northern Nigeria. So I have a personal dimension to the story that I related in the book. Yes, I advanced 4 main arguments in the book. The first is the fact that the numerous contradictions that have characterized the Nigerian state are the things that are responsible for the religious conflict in the country. Secondly, I argue that contrary to what the impression is, it is not only one religion that is responsible for violence in Nigeria. The general tendency is for people to just think that the moment you talk about religious riot, you just think about the Muslims. The Muslims are doing this. But when you look at Nigeria, all the 3 major religions in Nigeria, Christianity, Islam, and traditional religion, have one time or the other been involved in violence. And any attempt to actually understand the ramifications of conflict in the country when it comes to religion must have this all-encompassing view by looking at all the three religions. Then, thirdly, I argue that there is a link between elite power control and politics of religion in Nigeria. And finally, I argue that there are external dimensions to some of the issues that we are discussing in the country. But one thing I find very interesting about this is the general assumption that people have and the extent to which one religion has been used to counter the other through rumors, gossips, and things that are not true at all. Before I went to this book, I have had several instances of people saying that in the Islamic religion, if you kill anybody, 7 virgins are waiting for you in heaven. Once you die in the name of your religion, this thing. But when I got into it, I realized that it is neither in the Quran, nor in the Hadith, nor in any of the writings that this is the case. I think it's just a case of where one thing as the other has led some people to believe and to spread rumors, negative rumors about a particular religion. These are not true. And I also realized very, very seriously in looking at this that when you see anybody who is willing to die for his religion, rightly or wrongly, you've got to take him seriously. That is just the reality of things. When a man looks inside the hole of your gun and all he sees is paradise, then he's operating under a completely different thing, and you have to take that into consideration. But I also discover that at the center of most of these contradictions and conflict over religion is the belief among the Christians and the Muslims that they are the only one on the right path. A Christian may not say it, but inward in him is the belief that the Muslim is on the wrong path. A Muslim may not say it, but inward in his or her belief is the fact that the Christian is on the wrong path. This monolithic dimension of perception to salvation is at the center of many of the countries that we have. And both holy scriptures of both books have evidences to point to the mono direction to salvation. When you see a Christian will quote instances like John 3:10, John 3:16, John 3:36, John 10:11, John 14:12, Acts of Apostles 10, numerous places to show that it is only the Christian religion that will take you to heaven, and the Muslim and other religions are wasting their time. And if you see a Muslim too, you see a Muslim will cite places like Surah 3:19, Surah 3:85, Surah 48:28, also saying particularly that it is only the Islamic religion that will take you to heaven. Interestingly, in the case of Nigeria, it is only the traditional religion that recognizes the multiple dimension of getting to salvation. For all other religions, it is just one way. And this zero-sum interpretation of concept of salvation is at the center of many controversies. A Christian may not say it, a Muslim may not say it, but inward in his or her belief is that the other person is on the wrong path. This is one lesson that I think we have to take into consideration, and we have to know when it comes to looking at conflict over religion. But not to waste time, let me just say something about what I consider to be the contribution by scholarship to addressing the most important religious crisis facing Nigeria, that is the Boko Haram. I've come to the painful conclusion that scholarship has not done anything at all to address the situation. And that what we scholars have done, just sincerely inclusive, is that we have seen the Boko Haram crisis in Nigeria as an opportunity for publication, for career advancement. In terms of addressing the solution, I don't think we have achieved much. So Boko Haram in Nigeria has become something like humanitarian pornography. Just like the Liberian Civil War, the Sierra Leone Civil War, we just use it as an opportunity to go there, collect data, publish this, get career advancement, get promoted to this, get promoted to that because of publication. We have not done anything really to address the situation in terms of bringing solution to the problem. And that's the tragedy of scholarship. That is one thing that I have come to discover, and I am not pointing accusing finger. I'm definitely as guilty as any other person. That all we have done, and that is why when you get to some of these countries, they are not even taking you seriously again. When you say you have come for an interview, they say, so what? Those who came last week, what did they do? They just collected data and they left. And they have gotten promotion, they have gotten this, they have gotten that. They have even gotten grants without it having any impact on their welfare. So that is one of the tragedies that I think we scholars have to take into consideration when we are looking at our best to assist war-torn societies. So I will hold on for that, and then maybe we will talk about that later. Let me very briefly move to the second book, which is on religion, public health, and human security in Nigeria. I must say that this was an accidental book. I never really wanted to publish this. And I hold Eka, Shiva, and Fumi responsible for getting me involved in this when they said I should write and prepared on COVID. I think Fumi and Eka started this something about op-ed series on COVID. So I wrote a piece which I titled "Fighting COVID in the Spirits." And the intention really was to look at how the three religions in Nigeria address COVID. And one thing I found very interesting really is that Nigeria is a country where at the beginning of every year, churches especially come up to predict what will happen in the year. 7 judges will die this year, 3 traditional rulers will die, this thing will happen, flood will happen. But interestingly, no single person predicted COVID. No pastor, no imam, no traditional religion saw COVID coming. And that was one thing that first got me interested in this. Why is it that all those people can foresee the future and nobody saw COVID coming? So it's something that I found that I found very interesting. Although one or two people said that they saw it coming, but they did not want to say it. To me, I think it was a diplomatic afterthought. They definitely didn't see it coming. So if you had seen it coming, you would have definitely would have mentioned it. But one thing that I just wanted to do with this book is that I wanted to find out how religion has been used or abused to address concrete issues that pertain to human health and that can affect woman security. I think essentially I then decided to identify key things that are very crucial in terms of religion and health. And let me just. So I looked at pandemic, how religion has handled pandemic, how religion has handled the whole issue of contraception, how religion has handled the whole issue of the so-called miracle healings. So say, well, somebody has been cured of a particular disease something in a miraculous way. Where people, I decided to look at instances of where people put aside Western science to use religion to address their health issue in ways that can affect their security and the security of people around them. And so, as I said, I looked at that. Okay, for example, subject of how human security has been affected by the tendency to adopt spiritual solutions to medical challenges that require simple hygiene and careful governmental policies. What you can use simple hygiene to fight against, you attribute it to religion. What has been caused by neglect of your hygiene, you think it to religion. And I cited instances of where this has been the case. How massive population increase due to non-usage of contraception has impacted the security. How human security has been affected by the belief of adopting religious solution to the occurrence of pandemic. How the refusal to accept blood transfusion has affected human security and few other instances. So this is that has been the main thing that I've tried to address in this book. So again, I advance a series of arguments in the book. The first is that the weakness of health infrastructure, that is access and control, the challenges of human security, and the lack of successive government interest and involvement in medical welfare and human security are the main thing that has been that have been at the center of this religious or of these health issues. Again, I argued that the impact of religion on health and security has been abused by religious leaders. And it has catapulted the importance of these religious leaders such that they are now made to perform things apart from their spiritual calling. So your spiritual leader, your pastor, your imam, now act as your medical advisor, now act as your medical doctor, now act as your security consultant, now act as performing multiple functions for which they are not equipped to function, further endangering your own personal security. So we have instances of where you have problems about your health. Instead of going to the hospital, you go and see your pastor. Your pastor will give you anointing water. You drink anointing water. When I say all you need, and these are instances that all you need to do actually is to seek medical attention And it has resulted in a situation where many incurable diseases ultimately happen because of initial neglect to them and because of this attempt to seek a spiritual solution to a simple health problem. So this is just a capsule summary of what I've tried to do in the two books. I don't want to preempt what the reviewers will have to say, and I leave that to Akin and Ade to come and talk about. So let me end by thanking you all for coming, and also to thank those who are online. And again, I want to reinforce my appreciation to my colleagues both in London and in Nairobi. As a lecturer, I'm used to speaking for 1 hour, but today I've given you 50% discount. So once again, thank you very much for your patience and your patience in listening to me.
Thank you very much for that, Prof. Now, colleagues, allow me to please introduce our discussants here. I believe we're beginning with Dr. Adegbola Ojo, and then we'll move on to Dr. Akin Iwelade. So as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Ojo is coming to us from the University of Leeds, and I'll say a few words about him. Dr. Ojo's research sits at the intersection of humanitarian decision sciences, social justice, and societal prosperity. It seeks to address how states and societies respond to global challenges of social, demographic, and economic change, crime, human security, and globalization. Key aspects of his research and practice are focused on the ways that societies across the world meet human needs for safety, justice, socioeconomic, and governance-related policy needs. I'll also introduce Dr. Akin Iwelade, but even though we'll come to him just after. So Dr. Iwelade's research deploys critical theoretical lenses to explore the sociality of youth in multiple fields. It explores how the infrastructures of the city and cityness are shaping and being shaped by the corporal proximities generated by violent crowds. The aim is to understand how the neoliberal city creates the mob, how it disciplines it, and what social imaginaries are implicated in these processes. His research also examines how youth are both producers and inhabitants of the temporalities associated with oil extraction in Africa. So I think you will agree with me that we have a very rich collection of expertise here that will certainly deepen our own understanding and engagement with the work that Professor Lau has just presented to us. With that, if I could invite Dr. Ojo, please, to take the floor and please share your reflections with us. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eka. I don't know if you can hear me clearly.
I can.
Excellent.
We can.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me to join the session this afternoon. I think it's a very, very distinct privilege. And indeed, I feel very humbled to be invited to reflect on the work of Professor Alao, who for me is a mentor, you know, and a path breaker. So it's a distinct pleasure and a privilege for me. I think my day today, actually, before I get into the reflection, has been quite eventful because I had to navigate from Sheffield to Leeds, join an SMT meeting in Leeds where we had a lot of firefighting to do on, obviously, all sorts of policy issues, rushed back to Sheffield. On getting to Sheffield, I discovered that my external hard drive had been damaged, which contains my life's work. So it was quite eventful getting back. And I had to kind of, the moment I removed that external hard drive from my bag, I echoed the title of the final chapter of Professor Alao's book, It Is Well. That was what I echoed. You know, it is well. So it's been quite interesting. And indeed, that external drive contained some of the notes that I had made But, you know, when life throws lemons at you, you have to find a way to make lemonade out of it. So hopefully over the next 15 minutes or so that I've got, I will be talking about 200 pages of a fantastic book comprising 7 brilliant chapters. I think for me, I know, you know, many of us are already familiar with Professor Alao's expertise, politics, religious radicalization and all that. And I found it very audacious for him to delve into the field of medicine. And, you know, like you said, Eka, I mean, if anyone could do it, it would be Professor Alao. You know, he's already talked about how the book emerged, you know, from a column that he had written from for the ALC. Reading through this book, I discovered that there are a number of core strengths. And, you know, I don't want to get into my reflections on the book without talking about the strengths that I personally identified. I think I'm not aware of any other book, at least in Nigeria, that tries to intersect these 3 critical topics in such a comprehensive manner. So, you know, I think this for me represents probably arguably the first book that does so, you know, bringing together religion, public health, and human security in Nigeria in a very comprehensive manner. And then the other thing that struck me is that, you know, when you think of the, you know, the recent pandemic and of course ongoing regional and global conflicts and challenges, security challenges, I'm sure you'll agree with me that this book is quite timely and you know, and it's hugely important in terms of how it chronicles these issues for an emerging economy like Nigeria. I found it to be quite incisive and very deft in terms of its innovation, you know, and, you know, it pulls together, for me, I'm a bit of a data person. I was kind of impressed with the way Professor Alao was able to pull together a diversity of data from multiple sources, you know, an evidence basis as well to back up his arguments in a very critical way to help us expand scholarship and make it accessible to readers. So that I think is another strength. And of course, you've talked about the transdisciplinary ethos that underpins the book. And for me, it's a kind of illustration. I think the way it's been written, he's been able to illustrate, you know, how non-traditional, transdisciplinary, and possibly multi-sectoral thinking is actually critical and essential for engaging these sort of contemporary social challenges in Nigeria. So these are some really important strengths that I think the author exemplifies through the book. Now, let me elaborate on what I thought are some of the arguments that Professor Alao presents in this you know, phenomenal book, Religion, Public Health, and Human Security in Nigeria. You know, as someone with a background in demographic sciences, you know, I know people, you know, would kind of shy away from trying to bring together these topics. So I think it's quite immaculate that Professor Alao tries to link together 3 of the most complex topics of current significance in Nigeria. You know, when you think about religion, although Nigeria is kind of constitutionally a secular state, Nigeria is constitutionally a secular state. We, you know, for many of us who are familiar with the politics of Nigeria, we know that religion plays a fundamental role in the social, economic governance and decision-making protocols of people. So even though we know that constitutionally the country is a secular state. And if you think about public health, of course, we know that the Nigerian public health system is relatively weak with several challenges existing within the health sector, ranging from, you know, issues relating to training, funding, employment, deployment of the health workforce. And these are some things that, you know, come out very strongly in the narratives that Professor Alao presents in his book. And of course, insecurity, which is a third strand, is a phenomenon that obviously threatens all aspects of human well-being in Nigeria. And Professor Alao does what I think was a magnificent job trying to explore and explain the intersections of these three complex topics. So he advanced a number of arguments, and which caught my attention. And the first relates to the weaknesses of the Nigerian health infrastructure, weaknesses that it presents in terms of access to healthcare for people, and in terms of outcomes, and of course challenges that are created by insecurity, which are multifaceted. We can't go into all of that because of time. And of course, the failure of successive governments to kind of develop and genuine interests and responses to the medical and human security needs. So tying all that together, what you find is that there is a critical gap. There's a critical gap created by the failure of formal institutions to kind of provide that sort of guardianship, the guardianship that the people need, which has made people much more vulnerable to exploitative practices of religious ideas. And this is part of it. So what we now have is a situation where faith leaders wear multiple hats. And this, I think, is one of the strong points that Professor Alao makes in his book, where faith leaders wear multiple hats. They systematically combine their roles as spiritual guidance with additional roles as medical and security consultants, and of course, the consequence of this is that, many vulnerable Nigerians no longer understand where faith should end and where logic and science should actually take over from faith. And that is, I'm sure you'll agree with me, a dangerous place to be. Professor Alao's book also recognizes the impact of religion on health and human security as a growing phenomenon. Of course, it is growing, the impact is growing, it's expanding, and it has knock-on effects on political governance, on the power dynamics particularly. So he recognizes the power dynamics. And the power dynamics here is what the power dynamics presents is an opportunity for collaboration and tensions between statutory institutions and religious institutions. As a matter of fact, one of the interesting things that I found in the book is, the example that he uses where he talks about elites. And this is true. Elites in government now increasingly who have the responsibility, basically. They have the responsibility to govern the country, now relying increasingly on religious leaders to provide them with the validation that their politics remains adequate. And we saw that manifesting during COVID-19, for instance, where some state governors were keeping back the citizens of their states from taking vaccinations or releasing data that could have been used to track and understand the pandemic. So there is danger in terms of this collaboration, weakening the voice and authority, this type of collaboration, weakening the voice and authority that health experts, public health experts normally would have. So we now have a situation where health experts and religious leaders are increasingly contending for control over the narrative of public health issues. Again, I would have loved to delve so much into this because I found it really, really interesting. But Professor Alao also advances another argument, which I think is important. And he throws in the issue of ethnicity. it's hard to write on Nigeria without thinking about the ethnic connotations. You just cannot disconnect ethnicity from almost any topic you write about. It's very, it shapes most of the social and policy debates in Nigeria. And Professor Alao talked about the connections between ethnicity and different groups in terms of how those groups themselves have resulted into have actually begun to engage with the expressions of their faiths. Now, I've got 1 minute left, but I'll try to do justice with that 1 minute. Now, these are some of the critical arguments in the book. But in terms of concluding the book, Professor Alao's position talks to 3 interesting schools of thought. And he elaborates on a particular issue. How much of religion is sufficient and how much is excessive? This is the question. And I think this is a very practical question that a lot of Nigerians actually grapple with. How much of religion is sufficient for understanding and engaging with these social issues, and how much is excessive, And he talks about 3 schools of thought emerging. The first comprises of people who allocate some form of credibility, significant credibility to religion, and they place greater, they kind of place a greater emphasis on religion, believing that, committing their health and safety concerns to religion offers them greater protection. And the rationale behind that thinking is essentially because history always repeats itself when it comes to governance involvement. Government repeatedly fails, and history points to that. So why not shift to religion? Second school of thought is the argument, those who are people in the other camp, the extreme end, who just completely believe that, look, the absence of trust in governance and the inability of people to possess that economic capability to pay for healthcare is what makes them turn onto religion. And then thirdly, we have those who are in the middle ground, who believe that, okay, there is, they recognize that religion is important in addressing some of these health concerns, but where there is the potential for a coalition between religion and public health issues, as well as human security issues, science should take precedence. I'll end my reflections by talking about regulation. And rather than going into all that Professor Alao talks about, I'll throw a question out there. Can religion in Nigeria be truly regulated? Because Professor Alao offers some thoughts, but each thought has serious consequences and those consequences explain why they're unlikely to work. So I will end and pause here, give way for my friend Akin to also share his thoughts on the second book. Thank you.
Very insightful and very rich, given the kind of a day you've had so far. So I'm very, very grateful with a day like that you still carried on and with meeting with us and sharing those very important reflections that will help our conversations here today. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I'm sure, along with colleagues, we will come back to reflect on those a little more in the Q&A. Before we head on to that, I will now invite Dr. Akinwilade to please join us and offer his reflections on rage and carnage in the name of God. Akin, great to see you, and I'll hand over the floor to you now. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I should say big thanks for inviting me to speak about this book, but in particular to I'm particularly happy to be speaking because it's Professor Alau's book. I remember a few years ago, I think it was early during the pandemic or so, that he called me and we had a chat about this book, The Rage and Carnage. That was long before it was published, and he was just he was I think he was drafting chapters at the time, and we had a chat about the book. And I remember that one of the things we talked about then was he was talking about the book, but we were also talking about he was talking about writing in the context of this absence of time to write and all of that, and we were both complaining about not having enough time to do some of these things that we absolutely love doing. And I remember mentioning that, oh, I'm also actually working on a book at the time. And now Professor Lau has gone on to publish two books since then. I've not finished the one that I was writing. So I guess I should say thank you, Professor Lau, for making me feel really, really lazy and unproductive and basically useless these days. So, but I think that the question of religion is of course something that is really, really an important one if we as a way of thinking about the nature of politics, of social relations in Nigeria. And one of the things that struck me about the book is that it very quickly becomes obvious when you start reading from the introduction that unlike most books on religious violence in Nigeria, this one tries to offer what one could call a whole sacral universe view rather than a view that is overly focused on Islam. And I think that this is one of the key one key thing that's different about this because uh, there's this attempt to see religion as one particular strand of political and social organization, and that I thought was a very useful way of thinking about the role of religion in our national politics. And so, in spite of its seemingly angry title, Rage and Carnage, just in spite of that title that seems particularly angry, the book actually talks a lot about the largely peaceful nature of the majority of religious social interactions in Nigeria. And I think that this is important, in part because by recognizing the the quotidian piece, piece of the everyday that exists within these social interactions that he tries to understand, we can actually better understand the things that rupture that rhythm of peace, and and eventually, ultimately, hopefully, that then tells us a bit about what we may potentially do about it. So, how would we understand violence if we cannot understand peaceful relations? I guess, and I think that that's one thing that's one of the things that he tried to do to really talk about that even though there's a lot of conversations and very valid conversations around the role of religion in violent social interactions, but that in spite of that, the vast majority of religious interaction is actually peaceful, and that in order to understand the violence, we do need to understand, the foundations of the peace, because in many ways, these two things are cut from very similar social cloths. Um, and so, talking about the rupture, the things that rupture this peaceful rhythm of social relations, one of the things that the book talks about is the functional nature of religion, and how it is appropriated to define and to signal belonging, and how this is then deployed to legitimize social actions, political actions, generally governing logics that are otherwise obviously atrocious. And so it's the religion's ability to become a legitimizing tool for everything, both good, the bad, and the ugly, that I think that it's one of the most potent powers of religion as a part of public life. It's how easy it is to use religious narratives and doctrines to be able to rationalize and legitimize actions that there's otherwise largely consensus about how terrible or atrocious this action could potentially be. And one other important thing that was touched on in the book was the state. And I think that this is in part interesting because given that, like Ade said, constitutionally, this is meant to be a secular state, uh, uh, even though in practice, in the practice of stateness in Nigeria, Nigeria is clearly, definitely, obviously not a particularly secular one. But 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 that to understand what is essentially um, a realm of personal faith, that we really do need to understand the state as an we need to understand the state itself. But I think that what is particularly interesting is how is the important connections between the state's founding logics and the problems within those founding logics of the state, and how alternative moral universes, such as those that are constructed by clerics and these sacral figures, have grown to become so salient to Nigeria's social relations. So that there's a link. So the book is essentially talking about how there is a connection between all of the fundamental failures of states and fundamental failures and limits of the governing logics of the state, and the ways in which these alternative moral universes are able to emerge and be deployed on behalf of these new moral communities that are then created by religious figures or by faith in and of itself. So of course this salience is also about how it's not just about how the state was founded or the kind of governing logics that underpin the way the state works. It's also about the failures of the state, which then inevitably opens the door to these new moral communities that are able to be constructed and defended by sacred figures. And of course, I think that it's not just about the emergence of these new moral communities, but it's also about how these new moral communities are then able to construct legitimacy, to construct the very meanings of legitimacy, and that meaning of legitimacy then ultimately then is the kind of thing that undermines the legitimacy of institutions, including in public health, as the other book kind of engages with. And it is this ability, is this potential of religion to create these new moral communities, and how these moral communities then undermine and question the very legitimacy of the state. And this is some of the things that are kind of central to how to think about really religion here. So even though the book really talks a lot about violence, in many ways it's not just a book about the relationship between religion and violence. In many ways, it's also a book about the relationship between religion and governance. It's in many ways it's a book about the relationship between religion and power, and the ways in which all of these things then ultimately are reflected back to kind of reflect back to us in these violent episodic disruptions to social life that we often see across. So while I mean I found the book really fascinating in part because it brought together in a very skillful and quite beyond allow way, brought together many of the silos of ideas, of disciplines that we kind of think about when we try to understand Nigeria. So it talks a lot about the limits of the state, the weaknesses of the state. It talks a lot about ethnicity. Talks a lot about access to the state, and how all of these things are then defined and choreographed by the sacred universes and moral communities that are created are constructed by notions of faith and idea. So I think that this is not just this is a book that is valuable not just for its religious insights actually, or its insights into religion I should say, but actually because in part because it tells us a lot about the nature of the state, nature of stateness in Nigeria, and the nature of governance in Nigeria. And of course, I've got a few questions I would have loved to have seen answered in the book. And some of these questions do not necessarily are not even necessarily coherent questions, but I think that if we it seems to me that there's a lot of the conversation around violence in the book focuses on and for obvious reasons, I guess, but it focuses on the physical variant of violence. And but I wonder if the way violence is understood were expanded to include structural conditions, structural conditions like poverty, to kind of think about these things as violence in and of themselves. It is fate then as an organizing principle of state building fundamentally damaging the country itself. So if we think about essentially they are saying that the question is not necessarily quite coherent, but essentially what I'm saying is that if we were to think about religion, not just as its adherents, so we think about religion not just as the people who do religion, but we think about religion as an organizing principle, as an organizing principle with functional exclusions being at the very core of its logic. Does it change how we understand why religion is so violent in Nigeria and how structural conditions may facilitate this violence? So essentially, what I'm saying is it that the real violence of religion is not actually in these various incidents, so the Matasini, Boko Haram, anything like that. That the real violence of religion in Nigeria is actually its unencumbered access to the state. And if we were to think about the violence of religion in that way, and think less about the symptoms of that unencumbered access to the state, does it change how we understand the functional role that religion plays in our national politics? I'm not sure it's an entirely coherent question, but I'm just saying that if we were to think about religion in a slightly different way, we're not thinking about religion simply as its adherents, which then means that we have these normative ideas about what religious people do, but we think about access that religion as an idea, as an organizing principle, has got into the very logic of the Nigerian state. Does it change how would it change the way this book would be written if we were to think about it in that way? Another absolutely incoherent question is it also seems to me that the sheer pervasiveness, if you will, of religion suggests because we tend to write about the fact that religion is everywhere. We tend to write about it as something that denotes something that is a problem, if you will. But that sheer pervasiveness of it, the fact that religion is everywhere, does it not suggest a rhythm or a rhythmic social balance, a stability, if you will, of our secular universe? The fact that it's everywhere simply means that there is a certain social balance that is facilitated or defended by the idea of religion itself. And so, and if if we see the pervasiveness of religion not as something that is essentially horrible, but as something that actually provides this social balance, the stability of our secular universe, the fact that it's everywhere. And this social balance, that is the thing that is being questioned by the regular violence that we see and the way it tends to unsettle social life. But yet that violence and the ability, the violence of religion and the ability to will the violence of religion into existence is actually at the core of religion's ability to insert itself into public life. One of the reasons religion is able to insert itself into public life is precisely because it's able to use violence to how do I, it's able to use violence to embody our social lives, if you will. So I wonder if whether that if we were to take this provocative approach, we does not start with a normative judgment on violence as a tool of religion, but rather thinks of religion as an infrastructure of belonging, as something that provides this social balance. Will it change how we analyze both the actors and the outcomes of religion, the kind of public outcomes that we see of religion? Will it change this book if we were to think about religion in this way? And I think that essentially what I'm saying essentially is that if we stripped our analysis of the impact of religion on our social life, if we were to strip it of normative values of idea about of normative values around violence in particular, what does it change in how we think about religion and its role in public life? And Professor Lau doesn't have to answer those questions, but I think that these are things to think about, and to which would maybe perhaps encourage us to think about to think about the role of religion, and to see the religion in all of the complexity that it deserves in our social lives. I should say finally that I think that one of the key strengths of this book is that there are very I do not think I've seen any book on that addresses religion in Nigeria that tries to talk about religion, that tries to see this religious to see all the various religious faiths, all the various faiths in Nigeria as one thing, and to then use that, this notion of this analytical the value of the analytical homogeneity of the idea of religion itself, not of the religions, but the idea of religion itself, as a way to think about social and political life in Nigeria. And I think that's one of the things I took from the book. And thanks a lot for inviting me, and I'll be happy to hear what Professor Lau thinks about the very incoherent questions. That's punishment for writing the book before I finished mine.
Thank you very much for that, Ake. I think, again, a very robust response to the book. And, I think all the lines of inquiry that the book raises, taking us beyond the realm of what appears to what we see, even in the titles, I think was fantastic to think about the connections between the comments that we had. One was around how it allows us to think about the relationship between religion and violence beyond a general focus on Islam. How limiting a lens like that can be, and how the approach that's taken here problematizes that general approach we see. I think many of us who work on these spaces think of debates on violent extremism, totally appreciate this sort of a contribution. Another key point I think that we hear from both our speakers is one around how both books allow us to think about religion, not just in terms of health or violence, but also in terms of interactions with power dynamics, and religion in connection with governance, with interactions with the state, and how some of what we see and we observe actually link to that very intrinsic interdependency between religion and the state, stateness, statehood, however we want to unpack that. So I think another very critical point for us to reflect on and to think about when we think of what these bodies of work bring together for our own reflection. I can try to pose the questions to you again that we heard. One we heard from Ade was, we've heard all this, we've seen all that has been written. Is there scope to reflect on and to think about some sort of regulatory arrangement around how religion is deployed, how religion is engaged? Is there some scope for that when we think about, the Nigeria that you have painted, the Nigeria that you've depicted in a sense, pushing you further on one of the conclusions you came to in the book on religion, public health, and human security. And a couple of questions we have there from Aki. Aki, I'm going to do my best, but please do jump in to correct me there. One question is around how, and I think it builds on what both Aki and Ade put forward here today. The point around religion in Nigeria, the unfettered access it has to the state apparatus. What questions does that force us to deal with around the relationship between religion and violence? If we think about how that might be mediated by the state apparatus, by its resourcing, how does that broaden the way we think about the relationship between religion and violence? Also, I think I heard Akin reflect there on an aspect of exclusion that can, not always, can sometimes accompany this. So that is my interpretation of that question. The second one was around the pervasiveness of religion, the idea or the sense that it's ubiquitous, it exists, it exists everywhere. If we take that as a starting point and we come away from value judgments about religion in and of itself, but we think about how that pervasiveness suggests some kind of synergy with social balance in society. If we think about that, again, what questions does that allow us to deal with or to engage with when we think about the relationship between, or the influence of religion in our society, the relationship between religion and the state, again, reflecting on this pervasiveness. So we can come at this, in the book we talk about the violence, even though, as Akin mentioned, there's a lot in there that is also about what is, what underpins peace as well. But what happens if we just accept that religion pervades everything? What does it force us to do when we ask, when we engage with the book, the material that you shared here with us? I'll park those with you. Of course, these are points to reflect on, you pick and choose how you want to engage with those. Perhaps you do that, and then in the meantime, I'll invite colleagues, please, to prepare some questions that we can also put to Professor Lau here in the room with us. But of course, we still have Akin and Ade with us, and they offered very rich insights there as well, taking us also beyond the realm of both books. Please, I'm sure we can put some questions to them as well. So Professor Lau, do you want to respond first? And then we come to the room, the virtual room and the physical room here. But let's please another round of applause for our discussants there for those incredibly rich comments. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let me first of all say that answers to this question will require a much more endowed individual than me to address. But I'll just, can you hear me? Can you hear me at the back? Okay. But I'll try and answer the questions. As regards Ade Gola's question about regulatory arrangements, I think this will be slightly difficult. I'm not going to say completely that is impossible, but it will be slightly difficult because anything that has to do with faith is difficult to regulate, because it will be interpreted as a way of you trying to micromanage how I handle my faith. There are ways through which the government can come in and say certain things are not allowed. And it happened with the case of COVID. For example, they say, well, fine, churches are not to open. But even in that, if you see, as I tried to explain in the book, there are even still problems, because we saw instances of where the police, the military went and arrested a pastor for trying to open his church during COVID, and at the same time just instructed the Islamic cleric, the Malam or the Alaji in charge of the mosque to just say, Alaji, please just don't open your mosque, just go back. How do we explain this contradiction in reactions? You forced a Christian pastor to go into the Black Maria to take him to a place where he was arrested. At the same time, when you get to northern part of Nigeria, all you did was just to instruct the man to just close his mosque and go home. You see, instances like that are places where people have to introduce dichotomies and things to say, well, fine, we are not really in the same country, where you cannot have a consistency of reaction to anybody that has done something that has violated the law. But to go back to your question, I think it will be slightly difficult to regulate things, except, of course, instances of where you can argue profoundly that public health has been involved. And you are trying to protect the population by saying, don't do this because it will affect the population. And then you back it up. But even in that, you have cases of where there are some places where even the governor of the state does not believe in COVID. The governor of Kogi State, there is nothing like COVID. And it's not going to close down, it's not going to close down churches, close down mosques, close down anywhere. And it's not going to allow the people to take vaccine, and that vaccine should not be brought to states. When the state itself is not consistent and that best to react to things, then you can understand why it will be difficult to have a consistent policy when it comes to regulatory or any other form of issues regarding how to manage religion. And again, don't forget that many of these elected officials got into the offices they occupy because of their access to religion. They had manipulated religion and everything to get to this office, and they are not ready to do anything that will run contrary to that thing that affects religion. So putting all the variables together, it will be difficult. I think, I don't want to put it higher than thinking that it will be difficult to regulate religion. Now, to Akin's first question. Yes, it's true that everything has to do with access to the states. And in some cases, religion can be considered as a mere subterfuge to having access to the state. The ultimate balance, the ultimate goal of anything in Nigeria is to have access to the states. And if it becomes necessary, you can panabit your religion, you can ameliorate it, you can repackage it, just if it, and as much as it gives you access to the state. So it's true. If we talk about access to the state, then that would be something that is very crucial. And again, let's face it, a Christian clergy who has access to the state would not have anything fundamentally against an Islamic cleric who has access to the state, because they meet at the elite level. There's this standard joke between one of the most popular Christian clergies, Catholic bishops in Nigeria, Father Kuka, who is the bishop of Sokoto Diocese. He has a lot of very interesting relationship with the head of Islamic religion in Nigeria, that is the Sultan of Sokoto. They do exchange banters and everything. They meet in social gatherings with the head of Islamic religion in Nigeria, the Sultan of Sokoto, always joking with Father Kuka to say, well, by the time you finish your assignment in Sokoto State, you can be very sure that I will have converted you to becoming a Muslim. And Father Kuka returning the brother to say, my main assignment for coming to Sokoto State is to actually serve you the communion and convert you to Christian. So they do exchange this banter. Whereas on the street, you see people killing themselves, those who have no access to the state. So in essence, I agree with you that having access to the state is something that is really very fundamental to both religions. And again, the traditional religion is completely absent here. Nobody really considers traditional religion when it comes to having access to the state. But increasingly, this is becoming something that is of interest, with people now coming up to say traditional religion should actually be accorded some form of recognition and respect. And it goes back to the elite again. Many of these state governors are now having a day in a year where they devote entirely to traditional religion, granting public holidays to allow people to worship traditional religion. Because when you look at these religions, their impact on health is actually very important, as I try to explain in the book. There are local gods that people worship because they believe very strongly that it can give them babies. Rightly or wrongly is a different thing. Whether something is wrong or right or wrong is not what is important. It's important is that people believe in it and they are ready to go for it aggressively. If you continue to say that there are no scientific reasons for you to say this, there's no scientific reason for you to believe that the river goddess give you a child. That is your thinking. But the person who believes that he has had this baby because he had come to worship at the shrine of the river goddess is a different thing that she will believe. So this is very crucial. But back to this, back to the issue, it goes back to confirm the fact that access to the state is very, very important. The second question, I am not really very sure I understand very well. Maybe if it can be repackaged, maybe I'll be in a position to answer it. I'm not very sure I understand the content of that question. I'll come back to answer it when I know it.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for that response. And now let me take questions from those in our, in our room here and from our virtual room. I see, so I know I believe Shivai, oh dear, Shivai has a powerful question here that Professor Lau, I will package this for you to address. In the meantime, let's take, I saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. Professor Lau, can we go with this 5?
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, and then we'll, you have Shivai's question right there with you, right?
Can you just summarize that?
I'll summarize it. Okay. Okay. Okay, cool. So we'll go through it. Let me take comments. Should we, yeah. What was our order? I don't know. Show me that. Okay. Yeah, okay. Wale, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry I need to but Prof, thanks for this. You and I debated a lot of aspects. I think I was trying to find about that, even at the price you are doing aspect of it. So it's quite interesting to debate with you. And I want to go back to the history. You and I discussed this. Trying to leave it at and accentuate it because of the complexity of the regulation. You and I spoke a couple of times about it. But I wanted to read 2 or 3 things. More from it, more from it. The first one, if we leave Nigeria for a minute, and we look at the United States, and we love the churches, look at it in relation to government generally, to politics, to election. In our Trump people to raising the Bible, people praying for him, pastors praying for him, like that military of it. And how all of that played into the last election, even the first election. And how Trump is passing that with faith within the evangelical community, like Christian, born again, savior, defender of America against LGBTQ, and the rest, QAnon, conspiracy, and all of that comes into the equation. You look at that on the one side, then you come back to UK and the rest of Europe, and you look at the Church of England, the Anglican movement, you go to France, look at the role of religion, the role of the church, in relation to politics, in relation to faith. You see a very stark picture, a very, very different picture. But even in America, what is at issue in America is not religion like, but particular element of religion, which I call the activist religion, the activist movement, because the evangelicals are activists. They proclaim an ideology that presupposes that they want to create a biblical society and impose the vision of that society on the politics of the state. Notwithstanding the whole debate about this, the relationship between the state and and religion. Now, if you take that back to Nigeria, we are seeing a picture, even the same picture in Nigeria, between the Orthodox churches, Orthodox Muslim groups like the Charity of this world and the rest, the Catholic, the Anglican, the Methodist in Nigeria, much more conservative, who are not in the activist mode, and we take a step away from politics. That's what we say in Nigeria. The one that is at issue now is the same activist religion that we are seeing in Nigeria. You see that within the Christian community, you also see that within Islam. Within Islam, I'm a Muslim, you will see a stark difference between the Orthodox Muslim society, Muslim Jews, versus the Wahhabia strain that is now causing a lot of problems across Nigeria. The extremists of this is Boko Haram, but even within the Muslim fold in Nigeria, you come to the southwest, you see a lot of Wahhabia, graduates from Saudi Arabia who are actually creating problems even within the Muslim community and who are now already talking about confrontation, not just within Muslims but also within Christians, as part of this activist mode of religion and trying to impose that. That I think is one. Sorry, I'm taking one. Two is also to look at, in terms of regulation, I think, and I subscribe to what Arthur said, I'm a fan of regulation. It can be regulated. And I'll give you an example. In Saudi Arabia, the so-called epitome of Wahhabism, the epitome of Islam, and everything. Religion is actually regulated. Islam is regulated. Not everybody can go and preach in Saudi Arabia. You have to obtain a preaching license every 2 years. You cannot just go on the pulpit and preach in Saudi Arabia. You cannot. Why? Saudi Arabia learned its lesson from the 1980s and the 1990s. That is why it is now very easy for Mohammed bin Salman now to be able to detach the Saudi state. He is detaching the Saudi state from this Wahhabia religious group. He is now passing things, policies that go against the fatwas of the Sheikh and the Wahhabia movement. He's creating a new city, he's liberating women. Women being allowed to drive cars, go out on their own, hotels where, foreigners can drink and do all of these things. He is now gradually detaching because we are being able to regulate religion, being able to screen out extremists. So if you take a 2-year preaching license for Dawa, you are the only person that can be the imam of a mosque or lead a congregation, and your license will renew every 2 years. And in those 2 years, your performance is monitored. The sermon you give is assessed. People are there looking at you. They ask your congregation for their views about your religious activities and everything. And the state has imposed, on them that we are pulling away from this Wahhabia strain because they think what it costs in support of Osama bin Laden and the rest from the 80s and the 1990s. So religion can actually regulate it. And really, that regulation is the way to cover the error. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Someone was about to.
Almost on the church and start putting it like you have to do that. That's one criteria.
Thank you. So that gives us a strong point there about regulation, responding to what Ade had also said. I see Munia's comment. I will summarize that for you as well. Prof, I saw Gloriana. Was that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah, please. Okay.
Thank you. And I think we've substantiated religion and violence, specifically in and how they can hide from this. With that in mind, I want to how just people live in Nigeria and you have like schools that are just very good.
Thank you very much for that. Gloriana, please.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was fascinating. I think my question comes in part because I come from a context where religion is also very much a part of the social life, and part of its appeal because it offers and provides a space and services to very marginalized social groups. However, during the course of your presentation, you mentioned elite control and religion. So I guess my question is to understand a bit more about the power dynamics within this space. And are these religious spaces, do they provide a space for the social order is contested, or actually when the social order is produced?
Thank you very much for that. Yes, I've seen. There's a hand online. Okay. I don't see it. Oh.
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you and congratulations, Professor Alao. I just want to briefly comment on two things. The first one is the way in which religion has been approached in the study in both books. For me, it's a bit ahistorical. I think religion has been placed rather as the latecomer rather than the foundation of everything else that has been discussed, whether it's public health or security. Religion has been there before the state was established, and all the formal scientific institutions of the state that are not so working have actually come to meet religion. And so religion underpins a lot of things in Nigeria. So it's rather science that is struggling to find its root, and democracy and democratic institutions struggling, and formal state institutions struggling to find their roots within the Nigerian society, which is deeply, deeply religious. So I think at the base of the structure is religion and how it continues to play a very pervasive role in the affairs of the state and the society. Secondly, the issue of the approach or the reaction of the state authority vis-a-vis religious leaders in Nigeria would differ, and I'm here referring to the comment about arresting a pastor and simply instructing an imam to close their places of worship. Professor Lao and everyone else from Nigeria would know this very well, that the kind of claims that pastors do make about science, about medicine, about solutions to human problem, it's not as much as you can find among Islamic clerics. So that is why probably the state is tougher, taking a tougher stance on Christian, maybe pastors, some strain of pastors who make certain types of claims. So just to make this, but I congratulate you for these two books and also the organizers. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, you want to react now?
Yes.
Okay, and we pick up on it. Okay, I apologize. So I saw Professor Rashid Shoeke, and from you as well. So 3 I've seen there. We still have Shuvais and Muniz, so we can add that to make 5 in the next round. Okay, please, thank you so much. Please come and respond. Thank you so much for those questions, colleagues. Yeah.
Yes, thank you once again for those questions. I am going to attempt answering them. All I can say is attempt. I'm not very sure whether I'll be successful in this attempt. Wale, yes, you and I actually debated quite a lot of these things before, and especially before I eventually came down to accepting this, the title, which I must admit here was actually coined by my daughters who are here in the room today. So I think the credit should go to them for coining this title. Now, you see Wale, you talked about the activists in both religions. Yes, I recognize that. But that is what is interestingly becoming the vogue. Because even the so-called traditionalists, the so-called conventional Christianity or conventional Islam, believe very strongly that the way they can reach out is to imbibe some of these activist tendencies. So even when you talk about the Orthodox Baptists, Orthodox Methodists, Orthodox Anglican, you see that even within these organizations, within this this group, Pentecostals that I imagine, those insisting that we are not going to start our own Pentecostal church. We are going to remain Anglican. We are going to remain Methodist. We are going to remain Baptist. But we are going to bring about a revivalist tendencies within these organizations, within this establishment. So it's not really a case of activism or a group of Pentecostal people now, or even I don't know much about Islam, but I also believe that such a tendency may be going on. But in essence, what I'm just trying to say is we have a situation where even the Orthodox churches realize the importance of the revivalist tendencies that is now pervading across religion in both places, and they're trying to inculcate it within their own establishment. So it is not also, we are likely to find a situation where even the so-called traditional Orthodox churches may have within them radical tendencies. Without these people going about to form their own churches or Pentecostal churches. We're back to the crucial question of regulation. And the examples given by Wale and Toju may not be particularly applicable with the case of Nigeria. Wale cited the example of Saudi Arabia, where things are regulated, where you must actually do this before you can preach. We are all Nigerians. We know that such a thing will be difficult in sweet motherland. Difficult in the sense that, in the first instance, those occupying leadership position in Saudi Arabia have not relied on religious elite to get to the position that they are occupying. So the extent to which they can actually they can jettison the thinking of the religious leader is quite easy. In Saudi Arabia, people hold political offices not because some religious leaders have been responsible in getting there. But in the case of Nigeria, you realize that many of these office holders actually got there because they got the support from the political elite, from the religious elites. So when if they're going to get there and say, well, fine, I'm not there now, I want to regulate this, I want to regulate that, I think that would be difficult. I think it would be completely unrealistic for any governor of Ogun State in Nigeria to say is going to regulate the activities of the redemption camp. Almost impossible. Or a governor in Ogun State to say is going to regulate the activities of Oyedepo in his church is almost impossible. It borders on the impossible. Because of the grip of these elites, or of this religious elite, on the political activities of their respective states. In a situation where even the country is arguing profusely about having a Muslim ticket, and you think somebody can come up, do you think the Buhari administration can come up and say that's going to regulate activities of religious leaders within Nigeria state? That will be impossible. I think it will be difficult. That is my thinking. I told you, talking of Rwanda, Rwanda is just a population of Lagos State, not even up to the population of Lagos, or a bad population of Lagos State. Huh? It's not even up to the population of Lagos State. About 10% of Lagos State. The population of Rwanda is less than 11 million. How do you think you can, and you know the nature of leadership in Rwanda? In a country where you have more, although we have not succeeded in counting ourselves properly, but we believe we are more than 220 million. In a situation where we have 220 million people, and you think you can just come up and say you are the leader, and you are saying this is the law as we have done in Rwanda, I think it will be difficult. I'm not saying it is impossible, but I think it will be really very difficult. About how religion can counter extremism, which I think please don't think I'm drunk. I think it's just interesting. How religion can counter extremism? Well, it can, and there are efforts for it to be done. But it can only be done when people try to ensure that, sorry. When attempts are made to I think that one's
It's got shine. It's better it goes on the floor than stays on the container.
I agree with you that that's a major thing that needs to be done, and it's actually been attempted by both religious or key religious organizations in Nigeria. And the interesting thing that I need to point out about Nigeria is a situation where both the Christians and Muslims are now coming together, forming bodies to say, well, fine, there's need for us to organize regulatory, to organize ways of countering extremism. And I completely agree with you that that is the way to go. Lorena, I think I agree with you that power dynamics, social order, context. Maybe you ask the question again, and then I'll be able to respond to it later. I think I didn't get the gist when I was writing it down. Habib, can you hear me? Yes, Habib. Yes, I completely.
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
Okay, good to hear you again. I completely agree with you that the way Christian clergies have gone about certain things are quite controversial. And when it comes to the pronouncements of Christian clergies compared to Islamic clergies, quite different. And I agree with you that the way Christians go about things, especially Christian clergies, are quite provocative. But that has nothing to do with arresting somebody just for starting. He was arrested for opening his church. He was not arrested for any attempt to make to make pronouncements. So I agree with you that yes, in terms of pronouncements, yes, Christians do make outlandish claims to say, well, you have been cured, you are healed, you are this and that. And that is not the case with Islamic religion. That is true. But in this particular case, which I actually saw, what happened was the man was arrested for opening his church, not for utterances that he made in the church. And the Islamic clergy was asked to just close his mosque for opening it. So it wasn't a case of where excesses were made in terms of pronouncement, but more in terms of just, I've just limited that to the issue of opening places of worship during pandemic. But yes, I can concede the point to you that yes, it is true that Christians do make outlandish claims which cannot be compared to what Islamic religion leaders do.
Thank you. We'll take one more round of questions. I can already say to you, Gloriana's question was around the extent to which you see from your work, the extent to which religion has altered or challenged the existing social order vis-a-vis reinforcing that social order, right? Because in some spaces, actually, it can disrupt So to what extent has it disrupted existing social orders vis-a-vis actually reinforcing those? Is that a fair summary? Thank you very much. Prof, please.
Thank you very much, Mike. You're a very difficult man to keep up with. So yesterday I was asking Professor O to say, gosh, I wish I had asked you to get the books from me so I could quickly browse them before today's book launch and hopefully ask a couple of intelligent questions. But I have a comment and I have two questions which might be much more broader questions than this specifically this focusing on Nigeria. So the first comment, and just listening to the conversation about regulations, regulating religion. The first thing that I thought about was that what religions are, the religions themselves are under different regulating frameworks. It's not that religions don't have regulating frameworks. I mean, the different denominations, whether it's Muslims, Christians, depending on which denomination they belong to, depending on which type they belong to, they all operate within regulative framework that are self-generated. So this idea that only externally can religion be generated. So the point that you made, only about regulation in Saudi Arabia, is about the religions themselves have their own regulative framework. Not everybody goes into a mosque to pray. Not everybody goes to a church to pray. They have their own structure. They have them. And that got me sort of thinking about the fact that, again, following the conversation, that some of the discussion has been about religion vis-a-vis simply the state, rather than seeing sometimes religion in itself as part of the complex, as part of the complex power complexes that we have in Africa, or the myriad power complexes that we have in Africa, that beyond the state, religions themselves, as Abib said, are powers that existed before our contemporary state. I don't think they've always existed before the state in Africa, but they've existed before our contemporary post-colonial state. So one way of, again, that's why I said I was related to, I'm looking forward to reading the book in terms of sort of thinking about that. I know when you did the work on religious radicalization, you thought about religion, I mean, the various religious groups in terms of their different organizations. So that's the first thing that I thought about, that we should probably pull back in terms of the way we think about religion as simply a way of being an institution, set of beliefs that derives its force simply from interaction with the state, rather than one that in itself generates its own power complexes, which interact with the state. So that's one thing that I thought about. The second point that you raised, Professor Lauda, I think was very interesting, and it comes from earlier work, as you said, in the for religion. Why is this question important? Why is the question of religion important? It's not because it's pervasive and part of our everyday life. Right? As far as we can have recorded history, people in Nigeria and different parts of Africa have been religious in one way or the other. So that's not the question, because we cannot fully answer the question. The reason, and I'm sure what's behind the book, is these questions arise because of two things. One, because of the question of violence and the disruptive nature of religion. And the second point, as you said, is the politicization of religion in the ways in which religion seeks to interact with states that position themselves as secular, and the ways in which states that position themselves as secular in post-colonial Africa have seen religion now as particular sources through which they can mobilize and enact power. So I thought that, and I'm sure, I know some of this, I'm sure that this is what occasions the book. This is what occasions rage. Rage is not coming, the book is not written about the fact that we do religion most of the time peacefully. That most Nigerians, most Africans are peaceful. I think the question for us, and I'm sure that is in the book, is it arises because it poses two major contemporary problems for us that we have to engage. That leads me to the questions that I know you can respond to very well. insofar as the book is concerned. So this is not a Nigerian phenomenon. Once you take into the fact of religion being now encountered by Africa, a source of this incessant violence, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, not only in Nigeria, but across the region. We have, for example, in Mozambique, we are in the Sahel, we have in Somalia, we have in different parts where religion is deeply implicated in violence. So the first thing that I want to ask in terms of question. So beyond Nigeria, it's like larger takeaway for us, it might not specifically be Nigeria, we're just finding out with smart missions. The second point, and this speaks to the second book, which is a big one, about sort of public health and the way in which, if we take, I know Ebola, this I'm sure is about COVID. This question about public health in Africa and the way in which this round of public health crisis, not only COVID, but the larger public health challenges that we're facing, speaks, and you hinted at, speaks to what's happening to our continent insofar as our ability to do public health concern. Finally, actually, lastly, you hinted one question, and it might be nice. I mean, you get to take you just out of Nigeria. You said there were external forces involved insofar as religious violence and conflict in Nigeria. So that's a gift. It's that elaborate on that in due course.
Thank you very much for those, Prof. Rashid. And on those points, that if our discussants are still in the room, I'm hearing a lot that, you know, you might also, if there are any of those points you feel like you would want to speak to, please, when Prof. Alao comes, we'll turn to Ade and Aki as well, if any of those points speak to you. I saw some synergies with what you had shared earlier myself. So thank you for that, Prof. Rashid, Shweke, and Prof. Kempton.
The women group.
I think I have an idea of the question. So you have addressed it, you have not addressed it, well, you can always ask me. But I have an idea of it. I think I have an idea of that.
Okay. Please.
I just can't tell you about my my question is really just reflecting on my age, and I haven't read this yet. I can show you out there. And that is, if you take a look at the complexity of states, I just wonder to what extent there's a difference between like religion in an urban setting versus religion in a rural setting. We get a different kind of things. And how would that affect? This goes back to the issue about addressing something very evolving. And that is, with all, if you like, the questions and uncertainties about scientific solutions, recommendations, it was really fascinating to see the way the private sector actually surmounted these issues, because basically I couldn't, you know, eat the next day when I went to church, mosque, or if you had the government. But the private sector was the one that actually triggered extraordinary solutions to the Ebola. My only question there is, to what extent is, if you like, the interaction between the state here, so that there's so much, is it concept of influence the way one sees religious
Thank you very much for that. Oh, we had your question, and then I'll read the questions that were online. Just there were two, please. Thank you.
Can you provide the person again? You did last second time.
Okay. What were the feelings like the church parents
Thank you very much for that. I'll add to that. Thank you for that, Melanie. I see online they can't really hear the question, so I'll do a quick summary. The last question we had there, I'm going to re-say it right now because it links to something we've had there online. The first point that was made is the extent to which the influence that religious bodies have in a country like Nigeria is linked to their resource base. You know, what is the synergy there? Can we, you know, what would you say? What would Professor Lau say about a conclusion like that? That actually the resource base is what really drives the influence that the religious groups have in all that we've been saying today. The second point that was made there was the extent to which we can separate politics from religion, where religious groups or you know, religious orientation is used to facilitate political office. Is that accurate? And in fact, Munia asked a similar point, asked a similar question referring to Kenya. He's referring to a situation where in recent elections during the campaign, religion was used and the sanctity of a candidate was labeled in a bad light. Whereas in Zimbabwe, leading candidates were treated as leading candidates were associated with God in particular ways, and this was treated as a positive mantra, like this was the voice of God. So that contrast, but I think really links to that second question you asked there. A question that came from Professor Randolph Kant here was asking about the place of the private sector in all of this. So we've heard a lot, especially around religious groups, access to state resources. Where is the space for the private sector within this? I have some ideas, but I look forward to hearing from you on that. We heard from Professor Rashid a very rich set of comments for reflection there. I think some of which also spoke to what Akin said earlier. But the question that came out of that was, what lessons do these volumes offer more widely beyond Nigeria? And another point was made about certain external factors that are at play here, and how do those connect to the state of public health? Is that accurate? Have I misquoted you?
Okay, so
The second point.
Those are two different questions.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
He could just take the two questions because there are not.
Yeah,
other
exactly.
questions.
Yeah.
He mentioned about external factors.
Yes.
So that is not.
Yeah.
I mean, the influence factor and the external factors.
The two questions we want to take. From Shweke, we heard about interactions between women and engagement with religious groups, I think is what I'm understanding, and the extent to which that attention, focusing or trying to understand women's engagement with religious groups can be connected to ideas around gender inequality. Is there something there that influences that interaction? I'm not sure I got the second question, but I believe Prof. Alao had a sense of that. Did I capture? I think I captured all the questions in the room. One that came from Shuvai, really much earlier on. I think I tried to summarize it here, but I can't find where I've summarized it. But Shuvai mentioning what happens when actually you have religious groups. So we might think of the actions of religious groups as, sort of on the side. But what happens when they're actually disrupting and unseating state policy around certain things? And the example she cites is something we've heard here quite a bit. And people refer to state governors in Nigeria, for example, saying, in my state, no one will have access to COVID vaccines, situations where that is underpinned by certain religious ideas. So how do we interact with that? How do we engage with that? What happens when actually some of this actually disrupting really important state policy that has implications for human security, that has implications for economic development? Shuvai, apologies. I hope I have summarized some aspect of that in a way that stays somewhat true to what you asked. Professor Lau, do you can pick and choose what you'll respond to. Okay.
Well, I think,
yeah.
Thank you very much, Eka. I'll try as much as possible to address all this. I may merge some questions together, but if success is not attending my effort in that direction, please do let me know. Lorena, about how religion has altered existing social order, either by reinforcing them or not. You see, yes, it has altered. It has altered because in recent times we now have a redefinition of many of these religions, such that the increasing importance of the political elite to actually know the role religion can play in elections and in social interactions has resulted in a place where now these elites have redefined religion and repackaged it in such a way that it now pervades everything. Even in places where religion is not particularly relevant, attempts have been made to make them relevant, because at the end of the day, they do end up generating things that may be used. Am I?
No, go on.
Yeah. They do end up generating things that may actually end up being to the advantage of the elite. You see, the point is this, and I need to make this clear. Political elites will exploit anything to the detriment of the people. And this is one of the tragedies of developing societies, especially Africa. religion has been twisted. Has been twisted and retwisted in such a way that aspect of it that can be extracted for manipulation have been done. And that places the elite in a position to twist the population into any direction it wants to twist them into. So this is one thing that is very common in Nigeria. And that is why I tried to say at the beginning that is why people say that Nigerians are very religious, but totally godless. There's a difference between the two. Many of the things that people are doing, really, if you dissect the position, you realize that there's no God, no matter how broadly defined, in some of the things that these people are doing. We grew up talking about the wings of angels. Now people are talking of wings of private jets. We have pastors that have 4 private jets in Nigeria, that kind of a thing. So we grew up talking about people. You see, it's really difficult to conceptualize religion in Nigeria. And there are many connotations you can read into it. I have first cousins that are Muslims. I grew up with them. I took part in the Day Festival. I did many things without me actually realizing that these people are of different faith. But now things have been manipulated in such a way that we have now. So how did the whole idea of Muslim ticket become an issue of national importance in Nigeria, if not because people have exploited religion? I've not heard of it because that you select 11 players to play for Nigeria without asking for their religion. But to just appoint ministers, appoint commissioners, appoint for that, anything that has to do with what elite manipulation can come into, people get into it. Religion get into it. So that is the way I see things. Professor Rashid, it's always very nice listening to you. And I am the one that should say that I find it very difficult to catch up with the sheer speed with which your brain works. And I'm not really saying this for saying so. You see, I think the first thing I want to say about religion, about how applicable this thing can be to Africa is this. Or let me first start about the external factor. It depends on how we want to define external. And when I talked about external in Rage and Carnage in the Name of God, I was just talking about development in Saudi Arabia, in Middle East and everything, how it affected the perception in Nigeria. For example, the main radical, one of the radical leaders in Nigeria, shows Zaki, who was the leader of the Shiite Muslim in Nigeria, was the one that was vehemently anti-Israel. And that, and the reaction to that can be seen in the ways in the way people reacted to 9/11. How Islamic people in Nigeria reacted to Nigeria. And Sheikh Zaki will go about saying that, stop saying that the Israelis are smart people. Do you call an armed robber a smart person? Do you do this? Do you do that? You see, so we have instances of where people actually did come together to feel external reaction from that perspective. But there's another dimension of external that is interesting, and that is intra-African external. The former president of Ghana, Otto Mills, the first thing he did after he was sworn in, even before he did anything, the day he was sworn in, he reported in Lagos to attend the synagogue church for Thanksgiving. before he did anything in his country, he must come and pay homage to TB Joshua, who was responsible for his becoming the president of Ghana. And it may interest you to do that the former president of Zambia, I've forgotten his name now. The former president of Zambia was a gatekeeper at Synagogue Church. Almost every Sunday, he travels from Lusaka to attend service in Lagos and go back. He believed very strongly throughout his life that it was TB Joshua that was responsible for his assumption of office. And apart from the Christian church, Christian religion, there are other instances of where people have relied where political leaders have relied on external assistance from other African countries. I once traveled from Lusaka on KQ from Nairobi to Lagos, and about 80% of the flight was full of Christians from Zambia, from Kenya, all going for Sunday service at the synagogue church. So external, when you talk about external, you're really talking about many things. So it may be intra-African external, it may be extra-African external. But yes, it's something that is really going on. Yes, I completely agree with you that there are internal regulatory methods being used by many religions on how best to regulate things. Yes. For example, the Christians have the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria, whereby they embark on internal regulatory mechanisms for anybody that is allowed to be a member of their group. And if you can, and you are expected to be in line with certain ethos before you can be a member. For example, despite the international accolades that it has got, the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria never recognized TB Joshua as a member because they believe that he was practicing occultism. So they have things that they use to regulate, and that is what I think internal regulatory mechanisms are likely to be more effective than any externally imposed mechanism that is not likely to come from a government that has attained office because of assistance that it received from political elites. I don't know whether I've answered some of the questions, but I can try. Now, on the women issue, in Nigeria, as in most African countries, women are like youths. They are the neglected majority in an unjust social order. And anything that has to do with them can be easily dismissed. They work most in the farm, but they are the least to benefit from it. Their interest has never really been taken care of in almost in economic activities and in health facilities. In terms of religion, they are often not written particularly that you are not allowed to practice another religion, but many of them, in a way, find it even to believe that, even in their thinking, they believe that they are aligned to their husband's religion. It's only the few mentally liberated ones that say, well, you can have your religion, I'm going to have my religion. But more often than not, you find them in a situation where they believe that they are married into their husband's religion. So even if you are a Christian lady, if you marry a Muslim, the impression people have is that because you have married a man that is a Muslim, you're automatically going to convert in one way or the other into Islamic religion. But we do have ones that are sufficiently liberated to pursue their own religion. But going back to specifically to mental to health issues, they are often not considered. They are often not considered such that many of the things that you have in terms of health, women interests interests are not protected. No, most women in Nigeria, and as I tried to discover while I was doing the study, they were not even allowed to go on contraception without the permission from the husband. And the type of contraceptive they can use are actually those determined by the husband. I got to know in terms of during the course of research that many of these people were not even allowed to use condoms because these are instructions from their husband that they are not allowed to do this. And when they go for treatment, when they go for delivery, if there are medical issues that result into further treatment, many of their spouses just say, well, I cannot allow, unless of course I'm sure that you have been treated by a female doctor, you are not allowed to go into it. We have instances like that in many in Nigeria, which I discovered in the course of my study. So yes, they are at the receiving end of many things. They're not allowed to take contraception. They are not allowed to do many things. And even we have instances of where some of them marry into a religion that they are found now to, for example, many of them, they may not be Jehovah's Witness. If they marry Jehovah's Witness, automatically means that you are imbibing the doctrine of Jehovah's Witness, which does not allow blood transfusion. So what then happens if your child is sick and the child needs blood transfusion? As I started in the case of the book, there are many cases of where children are sick right from delivery. They needed blood transfusion. The parents said they are not going to have blood transfusion. And doctors said, if this child does not have blood transfusion within the next 2 days, he or she is going to die. It's not negotiable. There's nothing that can do about it. The child is going to die because this is the medical situation. But the parents said, no, it's against our religion. They're not allowed blood transfusion. In all the cases, the Lagos state government had to come and say, well, we are taking this baby over from you. And they took over the children in both cases. They gave them blood transfusion, and the children are now very much alive till today. Which would have been a different story if the government had not intervened. So we had instances like that. Randolph, in terms of rural and urban, the distinction is often very blurred. Yes, we have instances of where in urban areas, people are more sophisticated, they do this, but in many rural areas, things are quite different. For example, on the issue of health, things are quite different because there are actually no hospitals, nothing really to actually assist in the first instance. So it makes no difference. It makes very little difference. So it makes little difference to them whether religion takes over or not. Already these people rely on herbs from local something. So in terms of that thing, I don't think it makes much more difference. The sophistication comes in the case of urban areas where people are elite, they can raise issues, they can challenge their spouses, they can do this, or they can do that. But in terms of rural and urban, it makes very little difference in the case of Nigeria. The same thing appears with the role of the private sector. The private sector is actually there to make profit in most cases. And they are not really very interested, except of course in cases of corporate social responsibilities. They're not really very involved in many of the religious activities. They're not really very particularly involved. Many of them are actually deeply committed to their religion. The banking executives, the oil magnates, they are responsible to their religion. But in terms of propagating it for larger national interests, I don't think it's something many of them actually consider. Now, let me just offer what I consider to be a general idea about religion in Africa generally, maybe as a way of rounding up many things that we can talk about, especially some of the questions that were asked online. You see, we are now seeing a situation where a brand of religious, quote unquote, radicalization is not going across Africa, but it's coming from different angles. Attention seems to be focused more on the radicalization that is coming from outside Africa. But we have a form of radicalization too that are internal within Africa. A good example of this is in the case of Nigeria. We have Nigerian Pentecostal pastors in Kenya, in South Africa, in this. Many of them engage in very controversial activities. Very, very controversial activities. And people are now asking fundamental questions about their activities. A very good thing is their involvement in making money through tithe and offering. They say that they come to this country and with what many consider as questionable miracles. They say, and we have seen instances of that I try to point that one in the book, where somebody was actually trying to make commerce out of being cured until she was arrested by the police. She claimed that she had problems with her arms. Later, they were praying for her, and the arms were stretching. The arms were stretching. Praise God, the arms are stretched. He did it for the first church, did it for the second church, did it for the third church, and they said, something is wrong somewhere. You can't be cured 3 times. There's something very fraudulent. And she was arrested, and she confessed that she was being paid. That she was being paid, that she was collecting money for these miracle healings. That she would collect money and claim that she has been miraculously healed and things like that. And there are concerns now that they are taking this to outside Nigeria, to other parts of African countries. And this is creating serious problems because these countries are saying that you are actually doing things to affect our health activities. So, no, what I believe very strongly is that religion will continue to dominate the affairs of Africa. It's as predictable as tomorrow's date. Nothing is going to stop that. It will continue to be. And I'm sure it's going to generate its own area of scholars who will look passionately at this, especially scholars far better endowed than me to look at aspects of this. But you see, it's a major problem. When you tie everything on hope, the thing that sells most in Africa is hope. Hope is Africa's most important commodity. And it sells. You keep hoping things will be better. And when things are not better, you instead of facing the reality to say, I'm facing challenges, you say, it is well. Even when it is not well, it is well. When you don't have money, you say, I'm rich in Jesus' name. When your health is poor, instead of saying that I'm not feeling well, I have cold, you say, I'm well. See, everything is just, there was a case of what someone told me about a Nigerian woman who went to a GP surgery. You know, in Nigeria, we don't like saying things directly that happen to us. Instead of that, you tie it to your enemy. So this Nigerian woman went to a GP surgery, and she was complaining to the doctor saying, my enemy has cold. When the GP said, okay. And some people are saying that if my enemy doesn't get treated, the cold can be very serious. The GP said, okay. And I just think my enemy should be. Then at the stage, the doctor said, why don't you ask this your enemy to come to the GP surgery? She was sure. I said, it's not I'm talking of myself. So why are you relating it to your enemy? And so in essence, what I'm just trying to say is, we don't tend to face realities as they confront us. We try to package things in such a way that cushion the effect of what we are actually facing. And that is where I think the problem is. So that is why religion will keep on being the most important thing in Africa. We sell hope. Hope is the most important commodity on the African continent. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, Professor Lau, for that very, very rich set of contributions on these two books. I've certainly learned a great deal today, especially around the intersections and, trying to address these real life issues using these interdisciplinary lenses. Thank you very much to our discussants, who I think have had to dash off, but very grateful for very insightful comments, very rich comments and reflections and analysis that came from them as well. Huge thanks to our colleagues online. I know certainly Nairobi, for instance, you're 2 hours behind, Nigeria 1 hour behind, so it's quite late where you are. Thank you so much for being with us. Special thanks there to Njoki, who has been very critical and as always, as one of the anchors for our seminar series. Habiba, Yaya, I see you there. Thank you so much for being with us, an alumnus of ours, and sharing those thoughts. Munia, you as well, and of course our director, Shuvai, as well. But thank you all who are online there with us for being with us this evening as well. I can't see who's there, but yes. Oh, I see a good group there. Professor Melanie Abbas, I see you there. Thank you so much for being with us. Jide, wonderful. So good to see all of you and some of our students there as well. Thank you for being with us. To those in the room here, thank you so much for being with us. We are over there. We have some refreshments there for you. Do please stay and partake of that with us, and let's sort of be together and hang out together. But I thank you so much for your rich comments that brought us to this evening. A lot of food for thought for Professor Lau, but for many of us, for me as well, many of us in the room here. I'm just coming to be part of our ALC community here. Those joining us for the first time, we have these on a monthly basis. The next one will be in January, and we'll send out information around that. But thank you so much for coming here and being with us. And do please join us for refreshments. Those online, we will enjoy the refreshments on your behalf. But very, very grateful to have you all with us. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.